Yesterday, the world lost Hayden Panettiere at age 36, and I wanted to focus on a lot of the positives around this woman, her strength, her authenticity, and what her legacy is. But first, I wanted to address this article that Variety decided to publish yesterday, Hollywood Failed Hayden Panettiere. The trade publications are part of the Hollywood machine, and back in 2017, despite the fact that everyone already knew this, the lid was blown off this story in regards to Peter Bart and Variety and Harvey Weinstein. In my opinion, especially over the past 4 decades, the trades have been a pivotal piece of keeping a lot of the abuse in Hollywood quiet. Generally always ties back to journalists not wanting to step on toes. You don't want to offend this producer or this director or this actor. Allegedly, for a long time at Variety, touching Miramax or Harvey was unacceptable. One of the big revelations from when the files became publicly accessible was the role of Hollywood publicist Peggy Siegel for Jeffrey. One of the most powerful publicists in the history of Hollywood, and so much of what these two did was controlling power and controlling discourse. That being said, the trades don't get to wash their hands of Hollywood when someone who was a child star and had a lot of struggles because of that throughout life passes away. With all that being said, Hayden is someone that was doing commercial work at 11 months old before diving into television. My first real exposure to her as a kid in a movie that means a lot to me was A Bug's Life back in 1998. At age 9, she was doing fabulous voice acting for Dot. She brings so much to the movie. This is my favorite Pixar movie. I think it's a great introduction to ideas around class consciousness for kids. Bug's Life read-along, she'd go on to be nominated for a Grammy, Best Spoken Word Album for Children. She at the time was the 5th youngest nominee ever for a Grammy, now she's 6th. 2 years later, she broke out with Remember the Titans, and I honestly think she's a big part of what makes this movie work. I watched this movie countless times as a kid. It's one of my family's favorite movies in general. So much intensity and authenticity to the role of Cheryl, and she was acting across from one of the greatest actors ever to live and doing a fabulous job. She would go on to be very successful in stuff like Heroes, Scream, and Nashville, but I want to talk about her advocacy work as well. In 2007, she get deeply involved with both the Ronald McDonald House and the Whale Man Foundation, which focused on stopping efforts to hunt dolphins and whales. She had a confrontation with fishermen before leaving the country. The next year, she was doing advocacy work with governments of Norway and Japan to get them to stop their whaling operations. Someone that got involved politically and used her voice in that way, supporting Barack Obama, supporting DC statehood as well. He would suffer for a long time from physical abuse from Brian Hickerson, including severe physical abuse for which he was sentenced to 45 days in jail. She would use her voice in that moment to speak up and try to empower other people. Hayden was traveling with Brian at the time of her death in South Carolina. They had resumed a friendship at some point. The Greenville Police Department has said there are no signs of foul play or suspicious circumstances. According to the dispatch audio, which people got, they said there was discussion of overdose and cardiac arrest around the time of her death. A rep for Hayden said they don't have any more information at this time, but it's looking as though that is the case. Hayden this year had just published a book called This Is Me. She went on the Jay Shetty podcast to promote that book and talk about a lot of her experiences. I had talked about this interview because she described being 18, being led by a woman that she trusted into a man's bedroom who was fully naked and being told she should sleep with him and having to run away from that experience. Incredibly painful for Hayden to talk about that, and in her book she detailed other abusive experiences she had as coming up as a child star in Hollywood. Also came out in her book as bisexual, saying that something about me I was never able to share with the world because it was never the right time. I was either too young, I was being forced to be perfect at all times, not encouraged to just be myself. Now Hayden is survived by her daughter Kaya, who is in Ukraine with her father Vladimir Klitschko, who's one of the greatest boxers ever to live. He's currently fighting for the Ukrainian people. Hayden was with him in 2013 at the protesting there. Despite their struggles over a 10-year period, it seems they were able to maintain a really good relationship. Their struggle was Hayden dealing with postpartum depression, which she talked about very openly on Kelly and Michael. She said she never really planned to talk about that, just kind of all came out. It's something that's not talked about much in society. Because of that, on Jay Shetty's podcast, she said that Neutrogena, with whom she worked with for a very long time, told her they were going to drop her, which her agent said, no, you can't do that. That's actually illegal. But she said from that moment on, she knew it was done, and the next year they didn't renew her contract. Worked with her for about a decade, and they wanted to cut ties because she talked about struggling with her mental health as a mother. All this to say, I think Hayden was someone that Hollywood treated horribly, but was able to maintain her humanity and, like I said, her authenticity and her bravery. She used her voice throughout her career to speak up for animals and people alike, and that will be her legacy.